We're about to get started here. My name is Denise Jung. I am the Director and Senior Fellow here of the Technology Policy Program. We work on cyber issues as well as a range of emerging technology policy issues. We've worked very closely with both DHS and with the government of Japan on various cyber-related issues. And so we're very, very pleased to be hosting this event today with Dr. Akuo Misumi and Tom McDermott from DHS. Maybe I'll just take a moment to introduce them and also note that just this morning at 10 a.m., I believe at around 10 a.m., they signed an agreement to improve cyber threat information sharing between Japan and the United States. So we're excited for that, and we'll hear more about it during the discussion today. So without further delay, let me introduce Tom. Tom McDermott is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Cyber Policy at DHS, where he advises on and oversees the development of policy on cyber, technology issues, critical infrastructure, and resilience issues. He's served in a variety of capacities at DHS, including as the Deputy Director of Strategy for the DHS NCIC and in the DHS Office of the General Counsel. I also met Tom for the first time during my stint on Capitol Hill, so it's good to see a familiar face. So Tom is going to give a keynote, and unfortunately I don't think he has time to take any questions, so we'll move on to Dr. Misumi's keynote speech. But if you could just sort of hold your questions until the end, we'll get to it. So without further delay, let me introduce Tom. Thank you.
So among the issues that Denise and I worked on together on the Hill many years ago, not that many, but several, was information sharing. So I feel like we have finally come full circle in terms of some of the priorities that we identified, and now today with our signing of the AIS Terms of Use with Japan, seeing a lot of that really good policy work come to fruition. So thank you, good afternoon. Thank you to CSIS for hosting this event and for the warm welcome for both us and for our Japanese colleagues. I'm Tom McDermott. I am the Deputy Assistant Secretary in the DHS Office of Cyber Policy. And it's really a pleasure to be here today to talk to you about the important partnership that DHS and really the U.S. government has with Japan on cybersecurity. As many of you may be aware, we are undergoing a transition here in the United States, and there are some changes underway in the administration and the focus of our government. But it should be no surprise that one thing that is not changing is the important relationship that the United States has with Japan. This was reflected when President Trump hosted Prime Minister Abe at the White House in February, one of the very first meetings that the president had with a foreign leader, and by the Vice President Pence's visit to Japan not long after that. When President Trump and Prime Minister Abe met in February, they affirmed their strong determination to further continue and strengthen the U.S. Japan alliance and economic relationship, and jointly noted the unshakable U.S. Japan alliance is the cornerstone of peace, prosperity, and freedom in the Asia-Pacific region. Our leaders reinforced the broad range of issues upon which we cooperate. Specifically, President Trump and Prime Minister Abe noted plans to expand bilateral security cooperation in the fields of space and cyberspace. This is truly welcome direction from our highest leadership and supports the commitment we have in the Department of Homeland Security to working with our partners in Japan on a range of cybersecurity issues. Cybersecurity remains one of the department's primary and highest priorities, and collaboration with international partners is truly fundamental to our mission and how we view cybersecurity. By our record keeping, DHS has been engaged with Japan on cybersecurity matters since 2002. This is all the more impressive when you realize that the Department of Homeland Security was created in 2002. So truly, from the beginning of the department, Japan has been one of our closest partners, and we appreciate and thank you for that partnership. DHS has also been working with NISC since its stand-up in 2005, and we've seen dynamic growth and investment in our respective domestic capabilities, as well as a maturation of our partnership on cybersecurity issues since that time. The United States and Japan have a well-established bilateral cyber dialogue that is led by our State Department and the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which brings together a wide range of departments and ministries in both of our countries. This was one of the first such dialogues that was established almost 5 years ago, and has really become a model for how the United States engages with other countries around the world. We meet annually as a whole of government and have used this construct to advance specific streams of work in coordination with colleagues across both the Japanese and the American government. NISC, in particular, has been a close partner for DHS for many years, given our shared domestic responsibilities. We have focused on exchanging approaches to cybersecurity of critical infrastructure and our shared approach to partnering with the private sector to manage cybersecurity risks. This has included consultation on cross-sector collaboration model, as well as discussions around the NIST cybersecurity framework and related implementation across critical infrastructure. We also have shared approaches regarding the cybersecurity of civilian government networks, given DHS's responsibility and NISC's growing responsibilities in those areas in Japan. Of course, in addition to NISC, we at DHS also have close working relationships with other partners and entities in Japan. I should mention in particular our close working relationship with METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry, on control system security, including our joint work on developing training for control system stakeholders. And we also have a long history of partnering with JP CERT, who has been at the forefront of Japan's cybersecurity efforts for many years. Information sharing has been really a core element of our collaboration and engagement with Japan, both through NISC and with JP CERT. This is a priority area for the Department of Homeland Security, given the role of our National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center, or the NCIC, as we like to call it. By statute, the NCIC is the federal civilian interface for multidirectional and cross-sector sharing of information related to cyber risks, threats, incidents, analysis, and warning. The NCIC is also tasked with providing shared situational awareness and timely incident response capabilities to federal and non-federal entities. Cyber threats are changing and evolving quickly, and that means we all, as a cyber community, have to be ready to respond. At DHS, we are trying to lean as far forward as we can on information sharing, and really focused on trying to get ahead of the threat by providing operationally useful and actionable information and mitigation advice to partners as quickly as possible. The Cybersecurity Act of 2015 provided DHS with statutory authority to press forward with information sharing and provided legal protection to private sector entities who share information with the government through DHS. Under this law, DHS was designated as the primary portal for private sector sharing information with the U.S. government. And we are executing the statutory responsibilities through our information sharing platform, which we call Automated Indicator Sharing, or AIS. AIS allows two-way sharing of cyber threat indicators to block malicious cyber activity faster and more effectively. This information is shared in near real time, or as we like to say sometimes, in machine speed. Together with the cybersecurity community worldwide, we developed a standardized format for threat information to be sent and to received so that organizations can, in an automated way, deploy this incoming information to protect their own networks. By participating in AIS, stakeholders contribute to an information sharing ecosystem which will build a common shared knowledge of cyber threats, helping to protect our collective health, safety, national security, and economic security. Our hope is that the moment a company, a federal agency, or an international partner observes an attempted compromise, indicators of that attempted compromise can be shared in near real time with organizations that are part of this ecosystem, protecting them all from that particular threat. The purpose of AIS is to broaden the base and increase the speed at which information can be shared to ensure that a particular adversary tactic can only be used once instead of dozens of times to compromise additional victims. As NISC has developed its operational capability, we have been working closely to enhance our bilateral information sharing. and automated information sharing is a key component of that relationship. This morning, I was honored to receive the signed terms of use for Japan to join AIS, and this is indicative of the priority that both of our organizations place on information sharing and this ability to provide operational information sharing in machine speed or near real time. Expanding AIS through international partners like NISC and information sharing organizations, whether domestically or internationally, dramatically increases the reach of AIS and the scope of the ecosystem that we are trying to build. We are grateful to Japan for its shared commitment and look forward to working with them on next steps to implement the AIS program. I would, of course, be remiss if I didn't mention the Olympics, given that that is the reason for our focus in this event here today. Last I checked, or someone else checked, there are about 1,176 days until the opening ceremonies in the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo. And certainly hosting the Olympics is a significant honor that also brings with it much responsibility and, I'm told, work. So to Japan's credit, they have long initiated their planning efforts, and they are well underway. I certainly commend Japan for keeping cybersecurity at the forefront of their planning efforts for the Olympics. Certainly, DHS is committed to working with Japan and providing whatever assistance, technical or experience that we have that we can share with the Japanese government as they complete their preparations leading up to and during the Games. The related preparations for the Olympics afford us an opportunity to strengthen our cybersecurity readiness. I believe the path that we are on today for information sharing, automated information sharing, and other efforts will serve us well in 2020 and beyond. So in conclusion, certainly I think we have made significant progress over the last decade, but there's obviously much more to do. We at DHS are committed to working with Japan and with our other international allies to improve the cybersecurity in the United States and across the entire world. I thank you to Dr. Misumi for your partnership and your friendship, and I enjoyed very much our discussions earlier today, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to listen to you all today. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Tom. Really appreciate you joining us for this event today. Let me introduce Dr. Akuo Misumi next. He will be giving a quick keynote, and then we'll have a panel discussion afterward. So he's also going to participate in the panel. Dr. Misumi is Deputy Director General of the National Center for Incident Readiness and Strategy for Cybersecurity, also known as NISC, in Japan, where he oversees the entire staff and operation of the center. He has served in many different capacities within the government of Japan, especially in the field of security export controls and cybersecurity policy. At NISC, he led the revision of policies and approaches to secure government networks, as well as the establishment of Japan's Basic Act on Cybersecurity in 2014 and the amendments in 2016. He's also led the development of Japan's cybersecurity strategy. Dr. Misumi has a PhD in precision machinery engineering from the University of Tokyo, as well as a master's degree from Claremont Graduate School in California. So let me welcome Dr. Misumi to the stage.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zen, for your introduction. And I'm Akuo Misumi, and I'm truly grateful to the staffs at CSIS, and particularly Mr. Kawano-san from the Embassy of Japan for making this event possible. This is actually the first time in 10 years I've been back to DC. And it's a great honor and my pleasure to see you all here today. Let me begin by giving you a brief background of what we do. And Japan has been implementing a cybersecurity strategy, which was decided in September 2015, this cybersecurity strategy has a duration of 3 years. Currently, we are halfway through it, and we have only 3 years to 2020, the year we are going to host the Olympic and Paralympic Games. So, in order to enhance the implementation of the strategy, we are now conducting a midterm review of it, which is to be concluded by this July. This strategy includes international cooperation. We do believe that it is very important to further strengthen cooperation and partnerships with the United States and other like-minded countries. Today, I'd like to talk about our review and its core concept. That concept is called working together. Needless to say, this concept includes closer cooperation with the United States. First of all, I'll start with a reference to recent changes in cyberspace. ICTs have made remarkable advances, while at the same time, cyber attacks have recently become more and more sophisticated. For example, innovative technologies such as deep learning and blockchain are rapidly advancing and becoming widely used. These technologies will change the cyberspace landscape. So I think it will be necessary to redefine cybersecurity in the near future. Meanwhile, threats of bots such as Mirai are increasing. There are many botnet DDoS attacks during the Rio Olympic and the Paralympic Games. Also, there was the dying disruption case caused by 1 Tbps DDoS attacks launched from hacked IoT devices. That was much higher than we had ever experienced. News about cases of cybercrime and cyber espionage are often reported these days. For instance, quote-unquote, cloud hopper is a serious problem. Trade secrets and intellectual properties that were developed in the US and Japan with a lot of resource input have reported being stolen. Cyber attacks on critical infrastructure or CI, such as attack on the electric power company in Ukraine, have also been reported. These threats are common problems for both the United States and Japan. I strongly believe that both countries need to collaborate in order to effectively cope with this situation, because the internet is global. Therefore, international cooperation and collaboration with the US are the keys of the midterm review of our strategy. This is why I'm here. Today, I'd like to emphasize 3 areas where we would like to work together with the United States. First, one of our priorities of the midterm review is the measures we need to take to dismantle botnets. In particular, I would like to focus on the cybersecurity events that took place during the Olympic and the Paralympic Games in Rio, which have demonstrated how necessary it is to implement a program to clean up hotbeds of botnet, which are usually unsecured IoT devices, such as video cameras without proper access control. Several years ago, we had a program to take down botnets. It was a project to eliminate bot malware from compromised PCs. By cooperating with related organizations such as Telecom ISAC, JP-CERT, and relevant ministries. That program worked well. I think it is a good idea to start a similar kind of project again in order to clean up hacked IoT devices. And as botnets are globally spread, we should cooperate with the United States and other countries to dismantle them. Now, I would like to move on to the next point, which is about effective information sharing. This is also one of our priorities in the midterm review. Cybersecurity information should be appropriately shared and used for incident responses by relevant organizations. For example, in June 2015, it was publicly reported that the Japan Pension Service, or JPS systems, were hacked and by targeted attacks. NISC provided information to JPS at the early stage of the attack. However, due to the lack of cyber incident response capability in JPS, it ended up that more than 1 million personal records were stolen. One of the lessons learned from that event is that both an information providing organization such as NISC and a receiving organization such as JPS have the capability to the necessary preparations to work together to cope with similar situations. For this reason, we focus on training and enhancing the capability to deal with cyber attacks of IT personnel in various organizations. Recently, IPA, which is an independent administrative agency under METI, established a new cybersecurity training center with the help of top U.S. professionals. And I think this center will play an important role in our strategy. In addition, as a preparation for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in Tokyo, strengthening our prompt information sharing capabilities is very important for the protection of critical services. Therefore, now we are designing and developing a new information sharing system for the Olympic and Paralympic Games. This system is going to have an automatic information sharing function. Here, I'd like to take the opportunity to tell you that, as you said, this morning, I signed the term of use of AIS. AIS will be used in a NISC prototype system we are currently developing. The new information sharing system is going to be used by critical infrastructure or CI operators and other organizations and companies in the near future. Fortunately, Japan has not yet experienced any major disruptions of CI service as a result of cyber attacks. Because of that, we need information about incidents that took place in foreign CI operators. We expect the US experience will be shared with us through AIS or other channels. As a true partner, Japan is ready and willing to face up to common threats with the United States by sharing cybersecurity information. Thirdly, I would like to talk about the development of a common cybersecurity severity scale, which is similar to the PPD-41 cybersecurity incident severity scheme in the United States. as the relationship between Japan and the United States is one of the most important ones in the world in various aspects such as economic cooperation and interaction with people. I think it will be mutually beneficial that both countries have a common scale in order to avoid confusion among their respective public when cyber attacks take place. The purpose of this scale is to be used for prompt and consistent communication to the public of the significance of the events associated with a cybersecurity incident. In April, we revised the action plan for critical information infrastructure protection. The implementation policies based on that new version of the action plan will be one of the essential parts of our midterm review of the cybersecurity strategy. In this new action plan, our priority is to ensure safe and stable services provided by the CI operators. When CI operators face a cybersecurity incident and need to implement a contingency plan, it is important that all relevant parties share a consistent understanding of the impact of the specific cybersecurity incident. For this reason, there is a need to introduce a severity level scheme in cooperation with the United States. Finally, I'd like to stress again that the cooperation between Japan and the United States is multifaceted, and it is not limited to the 3 points that I talked about here today. The two countries stand side by side in the arena of international cybersecurity fora, such as the UN, G7, ISO, IETF. However, this collaboration between Japan and the US is challenged by a different approach to internet governance by emerging economic powers. In this environment, does national sovereignty trump the free internet? I don't believe so. However, these countries have been steadily establishing technologies, standards, and laws based on that idea. I believe that Japan and the United States need to carefully watch and respond to such challenges in a cooperative way. By working together, I strongly believe that we will be able to further prosper in the future cyber world. Thank you very much.
So we don't have a, yeah. Great. Thank you, Dr. Misumi, for those very insightful remarks. Now we'll have the opportunity to go a little bit deeper into the issues covered during the keynotes, and also have an opportunity to take some questions from the audience as well. Let me introduce our panelists. To my left is Mihoko Matsubara. She is the Chief Security Officer at Palo Alto Networks, Japan, where she works on developing thought leadership and threat intelligence and cybersecurity best practices for the cyber community and business executives in Japan. She's also a familiar face to CSIS, having spent some time here as well working with the CSIS Pacific Forum, I believe. And to her left is Barbara Grew. She is the Manager of International Strategy and Policy at the MITRE Corporation, where she leads strategic initiatives related to cyber issues and has quite a bit of experience as well on cybersecurity in Japan and their initiatives, their posture. And Jordana Siegel, Director for International Cyber Policy at DHS, where she oversees the coordination and implementation of DHS's efforts to foster cooperation among global stakeholders to address cybersecurity, communications risks, and to promote sort of operationalizing collaboration and leadership on these issues. And then also to Dr. Misumi's left is Sanai Sasajima. She is our translator today, just in case her assistance is needed. So rather than going through and having everyone give opening remarks, I thought we would just dive straight into discussion, since both Tom and Dr. Misumi gave a good sort of primer on the current relationship between U.S. And Japan on cyber and some of the progress that has taken place. Perhaps we could, talk a bit about sort of how to operationalize some of these key initiatives and make, forward progress on some of the three initiatives that Dr. Misumi mentioned on botnets, information sharing, establishing a cybersecurity incident severity scale. From your perspective, what would you like to see as a next step? Where are some immediate opportunities where we can collaborate now that we have information sharing and there's still work to be done to operationalize that? What would you want to see as the next step?
Thank you. I ask my interpreter to translate. 今次のステップということですけれども、やはり我々オリンピック・パラリンピックゲーム東京大会を2020年に控えていますので、そこに向けたですね、取り組みというのが次のステップとして重要かと思っています。さっきもお話ししたように、今 AIS をサインしましたけれども、これは次にオリンピック・パラリンピックに向けたシステムで使われる予定で、さらにそれを広げていってクリティカルインフラストラクチャーとか政府でも使う予定ですので、そこにおいてやはりアメリカの経験をシェアしていただくということは非常に我々の取り組みとしては有効だと思っています。
So when we talk about next step, we are always thinking of Olympic and Paralympic Games coming up in 2020 in Tokyo. And so that will be our next step. As I mentioned in my keynote speech, we have just signed an agreement on AIS. And this AIS system will be used on the system that we are developing right now towards the Olympic and Paralympic Games. And we would like to expand this system onto areas such as critical infrastructure, also for the government as well. So in that perspective, sharing the information or sharing the experience that have been gained in the U.S. will be very much appreciated.
Jordana, do you want to add to that as well, since you work on international partnerships with Japan, but obviously with a number of other countries as well, and you've seen this, different phases of cooperative relationships. What do you think is a potential avenue for additional cooperation between U.S. and Japan on cyber?
Well, thank you, first of all, for having us today, and for all of you for coming. Good afternoon. I think that to follow on, first of all, the theme of indicator sharing, given that that was a topic of discussion and sort of a milestone that we reached today in our bilateral engagement, I think implementing that, there's still some work left to be done. We've done a lot of work over the course, particularly over the past year, in getting to where we are today, but there's still more work to be done in terms of operationalizing that program bilaterally, and then certainly with Japan's plans to extend that more broadly with their stakeholders. So I think that would be sort of first on the list. But I also think how we enhance our processes and procedures to respond to cyber incidents that may occur is something else that will link to preparations for the Olympics. It also relates to information sharing, of course, and also the severity schema that Dr. Misumi mentioned in terms of how we in the U.S. approach responding to an incident, how Japan approaches that, what structures do we have in the U.S., how do they link up with the structures in Japan, and making sure that there's at least an awareness of that, and I think we have that awareness, but building on that as we proceed forward, so that if something bad were to happen, which we expect it probably will at some point, that we are ready to work together and have all the appropriate linkages made. And that is something also that we have been focusing on in the whole of government cyber dialogue that Tom mentioned before, and I think that that's something we'll continue to work on. I think that regional engagement is something else. Japan is certainly a leader in the region. So from a capacity building perspective, how we work with some of the regional partners and working together perhaps to share our expertise with some other countries in the region is important. And then finally, just I'll mention too, I think taking on new challenges as they come up. So certainly the Olympics is a new challenge on the horizon. And also thinking about the Internet of Things, which Dr. Misumi mentioned. Tackling the cybersecurity aspects of that is a big task, and I think that's something that we're going to have to work with Japan and other partners internationally, as well as with obviously our private sector partners, our range of experts that need to be part of that conversation. But that's something I think we will also be addressing going forward. I think that's enough to get us going.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past 3 or 4 years, we've seen that Japan has really taken a number of steps to improve cybersecurity for critical infrastructure. In the new strategy, in the Cybersecurity Basic Act. And there's clearly a big role for the private sector, because in both Japan and in the United States, the private sector owns the vast majority of critical infrastructure. And so, Miho, Barbara, and Dr. Misumi, please feel free to jump in at any point, but I'm wondering sort of, what is Japan's approach to securing critical infrastructure, building partnerships with industry to do this sort of thing? And are there, cultural differences or cultural attributes of Japan that sort of shape the way that you, approach these questions? Yes, Dr. Misumi?
Thank you very much. 民間との関係については、民間からの信頼を得ることがとても重要です。で、これまでも重インフラ事業者とは10年以上協力関係を築いてきていて、一定の信頼関係を作ってきたと思っています。で、サイバーセキュリティの取り組みをさらに効果的に進めていく、行動につながるための取り組みを効果的に進めていくためには、やはり情報共有をもっとしっかりやっていくということが重要です。で、日本の企業は今カルチャーについて聞かれてましたけれど、日本は歴史的に侍の時代からですね、ものを言わずに実行するというカルチャーがあって、でなかなかそういうカルチャーもあるということもあって、あまり日本の企業は公に話すことをしたがらない傾向にあります。なのでまずは政府から付加価値ある情報を提供する、その取り組みを強化していくということが重要かと思っています。
So when we talk about a relationship with a private sector, we believe it is most important to win trust of the private sector. We have been working together with the private sector for the past 10 years, and I believe that we have achieved a certain level of trust with the sector. But in order to lead these initiatives into the cybersecurity that leads to the actual actions, we need to work more on the information sharing with the sector. And Japan has a culture of not saying too much since the samurai time. Based on that culture, private companies are quite shy about speaking out. So in that case, we believe that it is the government that needs to first reach out to them and try to give information that is valuable to them.
Interesting. In the United States, we also have companies who are not as eager or shy to share, but not necessarily because of a culture of shame, but more because they want to avoid liabilities. But Miho, do you want to add to that? Because I know you've been thinking about this as well, and also from your role in the private sector.
Sure. Let me add up to Dr. Misumi just mentioned. So I agree that because of the culture of samurai and also the culture of shame, Japanese companies, just like, as you know, American companies, we are very shy about speaking up and sharing cyber threat intelligence with peers in a different industry or even within the same industry. At the same time, I feel that the short history of volunteerism in Japan is also making it very challenging for Japanese companies to share cyber threat intelligence with peers. What I mean by the short history of volunteerism is that in the United States, you see that volunteerism is not just about to support your neighbors. The community means more than your neighborhood. So you have to be mutually collaborative and supportive to be a part of community. However, in Japan, the things are a bit different because the concept of volunteerism was imported to Japan after the end of World War II. So we tend to regard volunteerism just to support your neighborhood. So I see that many countries feel frustrated to incentivize sharing cyber threat intelligence in two ways. But in Japan, I feel more so because Japanese companies do not feel it's a part of their volunteerism to share their cyber threat intelligence with peers.
Interesting. Well, so let's just also continue on this discussion about the role of the private sector in critical infrastructure, securing critical infrastructure. My interpretation is that Japan's approach is somewhat similar to the U.S. in terms of a sector-specific approach to securing critical infrastructure, and that somewhat of a light touch regulatory approach as well. And Barbara, maybe you could comment on that a bit since you're working a bit on it. What is the approach, and from your perspective, what are some similarities and differences with the U.S.?
Thank you. I think one of the first things I'd like to go back to the point of trust, and that there has historically not been the trust between government and industry, and what is government going to do with the information it gets from industry. So industry is concerned, whether in the US it's with liability, whether in Japan it's with shame. There is this lack of trust that if I as a company give information to the government, what will the government do in response? So it goes back to that point about implementation as well, because you can sign all the agreements in the world, but if people don't actually take action and share information, you don't get the results you need. And we saw that in the United States in 9/11. The failure to share information led to 3,000 deaths, and it wasn't until after that that we finally said we have to get serious about information sharing. And it didn't happen immediately. DHS has been working on this. It's a really hard problem. So finding ways to safely share information will be critical. The other thing is making companies realize the importance of cybersecurity. I think there's been a huge difference, and I talked about this at CTEC in 2016, was the difference between the boards of companies taking cyber seriously. And in the States, for a long time, the boards did not address cybersecurity. But after a number of the big breaches, the JP Morgans, the Home Depots, the Targets, suddenly cybersecurity was discussed in the majority of the boardrooms. I don't think that has yet happened in Japan. So until you get the boards of the companies saying this is important and I'm going to put resources to it and I'm going to take it seriously, you will not see a major difference and you won't see the kinds of information sharing that's needed.
Yes, please, go ahead.
そのボードメンバーが、エグゼクティブがですね、そのサイバーセキュリティを重視するということはすごく大事な話で、我々もそこについて取り組んできています。で、 日本の場合はその日本年金機構の事件の後ですね、だいぶその問題意識は高まってきていると思っています。問題はトップの人たちが我が社は大丈夫かと聞いた後ですね、そこの経営者に分かる言葉、技術的な言葉ではなくて、それをどうやって伝えるようにできるか、そこが重要で、そこを我々は橋渡しの人材って言ってるんですけれども、それを育てる取り組みっていうことを今フォーカスしようとしてアカデミアなどに呼びかけているところです。
I also think that it is very important for the company's board members, their top people, to place importance on cybersecurity. And that's something that we are working on as well in Japan. After the incident of the Japan Pension Service in Japan, the awareness has risen. But the issue is that so top people might ask the members of the company, are we okay as a company? But someone has to explain to the top people in a language that they would understand, not in the technical words. So we are trying to nurture or develop human resources that are capable of bridging the technology with the top people. And so we are working on that by calling out to academia right now.
So I think it's so crucial to get the leadership of industry and also companies involved in cybersecurity processes, because as you know, cybersecurity is about everything. It is about national security, business practices, legal, diplomacy, everything. But nobody has knowledge about everything, so we have to collaborate together and to get things going, because the leadership knows about your company and your company's business values. So it's the matter of the leadership's decision to how to allocate your budget and resources on what, including cybersecurity. And back in 2015, I remember that only 50% of Japanese companies answered that they talk about cybersecurity at the board meetings, whereas it is over 90% in global companies to talk about cybersecurity at their board meetings. So there was a huge, huge gap between the mindset of Japanese companies and the global companies. But I think the Tokyo 2020 incentivized the Japanese companies and also Japanese government to speed up the process of information sharing and also to get the leadership of Japanese companies involved in this important project.
I would just add too that I think that this is something that the U.S. has been working on for quite some time, and I think we are still working on it, as evidenced by, just today did we sign the terms of use for automated indicator sharing. That project is still growing quite a bit, and we are seeking more stakeholders to join. So it's very much something that we are continuing to work on. I do think that leveraging something like the Olympics could be very useful. I think some of the breaches that were mentioned in the U.S., that's something very tangible that people could understand and were able to learn from. And I think having something tangible, even if it's not cyber specific, could help to raise awareness or could be a linkage to some of the efforts that Japan wants to undertake under the auspices of the Olympics. Everyone knows what the Olympics are. Everyone understands about the need to want to have a very secure Olympics without any issues arising. And so leveraging that, I think, is something that could be very beneficial, just as we've had to leverage things that have come up along the way, good and bad, to be able to continue to raise awareness from sort of the C-suite all the way down to the user.
Let's maybe talk a little bit about maturity of cyber capabilities, including, capabilities in Japan. So, the cyber industry globally, it's a growth industry. I think it's roughly, there are a lot of different projections, but it's about $100 billion global business. And estimates say that, the industry grows at about 16% every year. large portion of that industry is in the United States. We are a net exporter of cybersecurity services and products, in part because we have a long history of working on this issue. But I'm curious, what is the status in Japan? Is your sense that the industry is maturing, that the capabilities are mature, or is there a lot of progress that you still need to pursue?
日本全体産業から見るとまだ発展途上だと思います。ただ例えば大手企業 NTT みたいな大手の通信企業、そういったところはサイバーセキュリティに注力した活動をかなり真剣にやっていて、そういった大手企業でいくつかやってるところがある。それからそれだけではなくて、そのサイバーセキュリティに特化した中堅企業などもありますし、さらにスタートアップも一定規模育ってきてはいるというふうに思っています。さらに監査法人もこのサイバーセキュリティに力を入れてビジネスを始めているという状況です。で、特に今先ほどからおっしゃられているように、オリンピック・パラリンピックに向けてサイバーセキュリティに関する需要は高まってきており、その米国の政府、企業、アカデミアからの多くの支援もあって、その点をすごく感謝しています。最近では日本の大手情報企業も米国企業とサイバーレンジに関するビジネスを構築したりした例もあって、こういった動き、インターナショナルな産業の動向も政府として日本のサイバーセキュリティ産業をより力強くするということから今歓迎しているところです。
Well, from the entire industry perspective, the cybersecurity business is still a growing industry, but there are large companies taking on this business, such as NTT, very much focusing on the cybersecurity, being serious about this business. So there are some large businesses or large companies, and there are mid-sized companies that are focused singly on cybersecurity as well. And there are some startup companies that is growing in number these days. And also there are audit companies that are also focusing on cybersecurity, and they are starting to do their business in this area. And we are also seeing a significant increase in demand for cybersecurity capabilities toward Olympic and Paralympic Games. And in that area, we have received a great deal of help from the American government, companies, as well as academia, and we are very grateful for that. And one good example of that is the recent construction of a cyber range on a commercial basis by a large companies from Japan and the U.S. And we do welcome such type of a trend and also an international initiative, since this will also help the Japanese cybersecurity industry to grow more robust.
Regarding the Olympics, I was actually just in Tokyo a couple weeks ago, meeting with various government agencies, met with Dr. Misumi there, and some companies and organizations on cyber issues, and heard that overwhelmingly Japan is very much focused on securing their electric power grid against cyber attacks in preparation for the Olympics, as well as the telecommunications sector. That those are sort of the two primary priorities at this time. And I was personally surprised to hear that the financial services industry was not among the top priorities. I would love to hear from your perspective how you identified, electric utilities and telecommunications as a priority, or what was your thinking behind identifying those sectors in particular, and what are some other initiatives underway for Tokyo 2020?
先ほどのスピーチの中で重要インフラの行動計画を新しいバージョンを作ったということをお話ししました。その中でですね、先進的な例をその他のセクターに広げていくということを考えていて、で先進的なセクターとしてファイナンシャルセクターとファイナンシャルサービスセクターとエレクトリックパワーとテレコミュニケーションを入れているわけです。 で、オリンピック・パラリンピックの成功のために特にその要求されるものというのは、例えばそのオリンピック側から要求されるのはやはり電力とか通信なんですけど、オリンピックにかかわらず金融、そこの取り組みをしっかりやっていくということは当然のことでありまして、で日本のメガバンクも非常に精力的にセキュリティについて取り組んでいます。で当然それをですね後押しするということで、ファイナンシャルサービスエージェンシーも注力していて、でそういう形で進めているというのが現状です。
As I mentioned in my speech earlier, we have just released a new version of critical infrastructure action plan, and we have included the most advanced cases. We wanted to expand our experiences in the most advanced sector into other sectors, and we picked the financial sector, electric power grid, and telecommunication as the most advanced sectors to work on. But for the Olympic and Paralympic Games, for its success, we are most required or needed by the Olympics to work on the electric grid and telecommunication. But on the other hand, regardless of Olympic Games or not, financial sector has been working on their cybersecurity, of course, and Japanese mega banks are very much active in this area. And there's also financial service agency to support them, and they're very much focused on this initiative as well.
Barbara, do you want to jump in here as well? Because I know that you have studied London, the London Olympics and the Rio Olympics, and their preparedness or lack of preparedness for cyber. What are your takeaways from studying those?
Well, I think one of Tom's most important points was that 1,176 days from now, on July 24, 2020, there will be an opening ceremony whether Japan is ready or not. So my advice is be ready. But I think it's really important to look back to other examples. So the London Olympic Games started on July 27th, 2012, and at 3 a.m. on July 27th, 2012, the Chief Information Security Officer received a phone call that there was a major Tier 1 cyber threat against the power system at the main stadium, meaning the opening ceremony could be disrupted. And that led to a cabinet organizing entire COBRA meeting that morning. So I think the point of focusing on electrical to start is a good one, because we know that that's a place in the Olympic context there are going to be issues. The same thing is with telecommunications. Good place to start. Because there's going to be attacks on that. We know that there are attacks on broadcasting, and when you have billions of people watching the Olympics, if anything happens to broadcasting, the Olympics don't happen without broadcasting. So I think those are good places to start, but they can't stop there. They have to quickly move to the other pieces, because as Miho talked about, cyber is cross-domain. It touches absolutely everything. And compared to the London Games, the Tokyo Games have to deal with the burgeoning Internet of Things. And so you're going to have millions of visitors who bring their own devices that could provide threats. You're going to have probably over 30,000 commercial vendors working with the Olympic Committee and the government of Japan. And all of those devices will not be secure and are going to, intentionally or not, introduce insecurities into the system. And so London had a very difficult challenge. It got even greater at Rio, where they got even into hack the drug testing system. Can you imagine getting into that and changing the drug testing results of particular athletes that could affect the outcomes of the games and who can compete? So I think that there's lessons to be learned from the earlier ones, so it's a good place to start, but you must continue, because it is going to be even worse than any of the prior examples.
And for Rio, one of the things that I heard was that was completely unanticipated was that cyber criminals from all over the world actually descended upon Rio, and were launching ATM attacks, card skimming attacks, phishing attacks on participants, on people that were just attending. Obviously, these folks weren't there for the Olympics, but they were, going to Rio for that purpose.
The Olympics are a major target. It is a target-rich field, and you have, it's not sort of ordinary business. You're going to have millions of people descending in a very short period of time. As I say, lots more devices. So cybercrime has a field day. And then you also have the fact that to do a cyber attack, you don't actually have to come to Tokyo. You don't have to go through border control. I can do an attack from any place in the world, and that is a very big challenge that you have to worry about, because you can maybe stop some of those criminals coming across your border, but it's going to be much harder to stop the crime and things that happen across the internet.
Right. Another anecdote is that some of the criminal actors who knew that people were calling their credit card companies to say, hey, I'm going to be traveling in Rio during this time, actually changed their tactics and targets for using fraudulent payments to companies based in Rio, knowing that a lot of the banks would be prepared and thinking that the transactions going to Rio would be legitimate when they're not. So that I thought was kind of interesting and smart. I'd like to talk about Japan's role in cybersecurity in the Asia-Pacific region. I think Japan plays an important role in the region as a technology hub, and as a source of capacity building, with partner countries in ASEAN, other parts of Asia. And I'd love to hear more about your efforts and initiatives there.
日本は先ほどちょっと申し上げます JP サートという、サートの期間がもう長い期間アジア地域、だけではなくてアフリカも含めなども含めてサートの立ち上げに協力してきていて、でアジアパシフィック地域では AP サートなども、立ち上げに取り組んできたわけです。そういったところでまず国のサート作りということに協力してきている。それから政府間の関係で申し上げますと、我々はもう10年ぐらい前から ASEAN と政策対話、サイバーセキュリティに関する政策対話を続けてきていて、その中で例えば重要インフラについてどのような取り組みをしたらいいかのガイドラインを作ったり、それから人材育成に関して真剣に議論してきたりして、で ASEAN とは我々経済関係もすごく強いので、そのサイバー面での信頼関係についても一生懸命取り組んできているのが現状です。
Japan has actually been working in Asia as well as Africa in terms of JP CERT. We have been helping those countries establish their own CERT, and we have helped establish AP CERT in the Asia-Pacific region. So we are helping out in those countries in terms of CERT. And also regarding the relationship between the governments, we have been carrying out cybersecurity policy dialogue with the countries in Asia, starting in about 10 years ago. And in that platform, we have been working on the guidelines for critical infrastructure effort, as well as discussions on human resource development. So we already have a very strong ties with ASEAN countries in terms of economy, but we would also like to enhance our relationship in terms of cybersecurity.
I think workforce issues in terms of building capacity is a big challenge for every country, including in the United States, where there's a huge shortage of cybersecurity professionals, both on the technical side as well as on the strategy, risk management, policy side as well. What kind of, human capacity, workforce development activities are taking place in Japan, focused on building capacity in Japan?
人材にはおっしゃる通りで、いろいろな人たちが、いろんなタイプの人たちが必要です。で、一つはエンジニア系、それからレスポンスのためのですね、人々。ここは総務省、経済産業省などが、トレーニングセンターを作って、それで人材の育成ということをやっています。それから大事なことは、先ほども申しましたけれども、例えばビジネスストラテジーをですね、立てるときに、そこにサイバーセキュリティの観点も入れるとかですね、それからその組織の中でいろんな人たちを率いていく、そういう、役割を担う人たち、ここがまだ日本少し少ないかなと思っていて、でそのため先ほど申しましたけど、橋渡しの人材ということで、そのアカデミアなどに呼びかけて、そのためのプログラムが考えられないかなどを話し合っているところです。最近人材育成に関するプログラムを、新しいバージョンを我々作りましたけれども、そこでもその各トレーニングセンターとか、それからその人材育成機関の間をブリッジするためのワーキングを作って、ワーキンググループを作って、そしてカリキュラムなどもですね、議論していこうということを最近やっているところです。
As you rightly mentioned, we need different types of people around cybersecurity. First off, we need engineering team and as well as response team. And for that area, Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, as well as Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, have built a training center. So we were working on that in that area. And as I mentioned earlier, when we establish a business strategy, we need to include the cybersecurity perspective into the strategies. So we need leadership that can understand the importance of cybersecurity, and we do not have enough human resources like that in Japan today. So that is the reason why we are working on the bridging the personnel that can bridge between the technology and people, and we're calling out to the academia to create programs that would nurture such type of people. And we have just recently announced a new program for human resource development, and that includes the training center as well as the bridging initiative. And we are creating a working group for that purpose, and we're now discussing the curriculum for nurturing such human resources.
Miho, do you want to add to that as well?
Sure. So METI estimated last year that Japan is short of actually 130,000 cybersecurity professionals in short. And if nothing happens over the next 4 years, I mean by the Tokyo 2020, the shortage will grow up to 190,000 people. And it's a big number. So I'm so glad to see, as Dr. Misumi mentioned, that the Japanese government is spearheaded to create a Center of Excellence and National Cyber Training Center under the METI and MIG to train technical people, but also business executives who are well aware of cybersecurity importance to protect critical infrastructure. But as a person who works in the industry right now, I'm also proud to see the Japanese companies are now stepping up to create a new ecosystem for human resources development. So NTT, Hitachi, and NEC took the leadership to create industrial cybersecurity human resources development committee with other major Japanese companies 2 years ago, and they're creating a case study to interview with different Japanese major companies what kind of cybersecurity professionals they have on how they recruit, maintain, and educate and train cybersecurity professionals in each company. And the number of the membership now is 48. And it's so impressive that because it is the first Japanese company's initiative to have such a cross-domain effort to reach out to actually the competitors to share notes and also best practices, because under the pressure of Tokyo 2020, we are now realized that cybersecurity is not just about a cost center, it's actually an opportunity to collaborate with new partners. So, I don't think that the shortage of 190,000 people will be resolved overnight. It's impossible. However, we see silver lining ahead of the tunnel, because we are expanding our efforts to reach out to new partners, to create a new ecosystem with the government and also academia and also new country partners, including the United States. So I still see the positive changes within Japan, and I think we can do it.
Denise, can I? Yeah, please. I think one of the important things to understand is it's not just Japan that has the shortage. All the countries have shortages, which points out how important information sharing and cooperation is so you can be more efficient and so you don't need as many people if you are cooperating well and you're sharing information. So I think that that's a critical message out of all those shortages. The other interesting thing is the number of millennials who are not going into cybersecurity, which is interesting to me because you think of the millennials as being cyber natives and that they would be rushing to be in this field, and the opposite is true. And I think that the cyber world has to figure out how does it become an attractive place to bring new youth in who can bring important perspectives, and I think we're not yet there.
We did a study at CSIS on how to attract more people to the cybersecurity profession and how to hack the skills shortage, let's call it. And what we found is that for young people, they really enjoy the competitive aspect of hacking, competitions. So CTFs, capture the flag exercises, and that in fact, sort of hands-on keyboard experience hacking devices is much more appealing to young people than learning network defense tactics and being a network defender, but you can quickly sort of turn those skills into defensive skills. I think we did an assessment of sort of what are the top hacking competitions around the world, and we found, that U.S. was a destination for that. Israel's another destination. It explains why they have such a strong cybersecurity industry. We couldn't find one in Japan, however. So maybe that's something you ought to think about.
日本でもその CTF っていうのあるんですけれども、でそれであとそういう技術をですね磨くためのそういうスクールに若い人たち申し込んで溢れてる、参加できずその定員オーバーして参加できない人にあふれてる、そういう状況はある。ですからおっしゃる通りで、そういう若い人たちがそういうサイバーセキュリティに対して興味を持たせる取り組みっていうのはあると思います。で、確かに CTF 日本でやってるんですけど、まだちょっとトップになれないっていう状況があってですね、それは何とかしなきゃいけないなと思っているところです。で、あとちょっと話変わるんですけれども、政府の中での人材取り組みとしては、我々各省庁がやはりセキュリティについて認識持たないといけないので、 DDG レベルで専任のそういうセキュリティ担当の高官を置いて、でその下でワークフォース定員をですね、新しいポストを作る、そういう取り組みを行ったりして、で政府の中でも問題意識を持たせるような形で取り組んでいるところです。
We actually do have CTF in Japan, and we also have schools to hone that type of skill, and a lot of people apply. It's actually more than the schools can handle or accept. So there are young people who are interested, and we're also working on having them more interested in such areas. But the problem is that we cannot come up to the top at CTF yet, so we have to work on that a little bit. And changing subject just a little bit, we are working within the government for that purpose as well. We need to raise the awareness in each agency about the importance of cybersecurity. So we have decided to create a post that is dedicated to cybersecurity in each agency at the DDG level. So we're trying to create, or we have created new posts in the workforce for that end.
.それでその人材のプログラム政府で作ってきたんですけど、最初に始めたのはですね、そこでいる笑ってますけど日本大使館の川野さんで、彼はあと GSOC のファウンダーでもあってですね、そういう意味じゃ彼をですね今後ですねもっとたくさん使ってアメリカとの間でですね人材育成の架け橋にしたいなと思います。
I just wanted to mention that the person who started this human resource development program is that smiley person sitting right there, Mr. Kawano from the embassy. He's also a founder of GSOC in Japan as well, so I would like to fully utilize him in being the bridge between Japan and the U.S. in this area.
Great. Well, our study on the hacking competitions is a few years old, so maybe we need to update it. At this point, I thought maybe we could take a few questions from the audience. I think we have about 10 minutes or so. If you have a question, just please raise your hand, and a microphone will come to you, and just take a moment to introduce yourself as well. I have a question over there.
I'm Graham Dietz from Sasakawa, USA. Thanks for a great panel today. Barbara, I'm going to pick on you because you brought this up. In terms of getting millennials, young people into the cybersecurity workforce, a widely acknowledged problem is that a lot of companies that are looking to hire cybersecurity talent, even at the entry-level point, are still looking for kind of outmoded measures like master's degrees or bachelor's degrees in computer science, 10 years experience in a technology that's 5 years old, things that are unreasonable or unnecessary, really. How do we get companies who are looking to foster their cybersecurity talent to get people who are interested and who have the skills that are necessary to grow their skills and become the kind of cybersecurity professionals that we're lacking right now?
I think one of the key things is that you have to have human resources work more closely with the cyber units in these companies to understand that there might be different skill sets that you're looking for, that the traditional thing of what level of degree you have. I mean, we clearly see how many of the key companies who have done well, the leaders of them don't even have college degrees. And so how do you say, what I need are these skills, not these credentials? And I think that requires human resources to get more involved in the process, in talking to the cyber folks to understand the needs better as opposed to the traditional hiring process. And so I think it's going to be flexibility is going to be one of the things. The other problem is that you've got companies in the private sector who can offer young people coming into this field, the foosball, the food 24/7, and how do you get them to go into government or in the nonprofit sector and convince them that mission is more important than the kind of perks you can give them? So I think it's a double-edged sword to get those people into government and keep them in government.
I think we had a question in the front here.
Yes, my name is Russell King. FBI Director Comey's been asked a lot of questions by Congress, and a lot of the questions he won't answer either, I think, because it's classified, he'll talk about a classified setting, or maybe we've got a particular strategy we don't want our enemy to know. But you haven't said too much about our cyber adversaries. I've heard that sometimes they're members of international criminal groups and so forth. Can you tell me what what should the American public know specifically about the tactics of our cyber adversaries? Is that something we should not talk about, or is that something that that the public should know more about?
Is that directed at me?
It's directed at anybody wants to answer.
Well, I'll start, but I think we can, DHS has an important position to add to this. I think there's a difference between letting them know sources and methods, how we learn about what our adversaries are doing, which the people don't need to know, versus the techniques, tactics, and procedures, which is what they have to defend against. And this is one of the key things also of government working with industry. So there's classified information that shouldn't be shared with industry, but industry doesn't need to know how we got information or who is actually doing these kinds of things. Industry just needs to know what do they need to defend against and how best to do it. So I think you have to separate those things out, and that government can do a better job of figuring out what should be classified and what should be able to be shared widely to help people protect themselves, particularly because we want industry to be an active participant in this realm.
I think that's absolutely right, and I do think that there have been public statements by U.S. government officials that are tasked specifically with looking at sort of the threat environment, like the Director of National Intelligence and some of the assessments they do on an annual basis have come out and said specifically some of the concerns about capability development in certain countries, for example. But I think Barbara's absolutely right, and the focus that we take is really on computer network protection or computer network defense, and focusing on the protection side of that. We're kind of, on some level, threat agnostic in terms of mitigation efforts that need to be undertaken. The TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures really are paramount with regard to what we think is most critical to prevent the government from being impacted, from private sector, other stakeholders from being impacted. And so I don't know that the public necessarily, in terms, your question was about public awareness. I mean, I think that there is an increase in public awareness given a lot of the events that have taken place and a lot of the public statements that have been made by officials about what is going on. But I think that, I don't know that that's something that we need everybody across the United States to be focusing on a regular basis.
Really also a wealth of information now available about different threat actor groups, including nation states, that security firms put together. And a lot of times their analysis is just as good as the analysis that some government entities put together. So, especially on Russian hacking lately and Chinese hacking groups, there's a tremendous amount of material out there. Well, it doesn't cover sources and methods, obviously, but it's incredibly useful. Do we have any other questions in the audience? Yes, up here in the front.
Thank you very much for discussing. And in my question, in 2015, I was in Pension Bureau in Ministry of Health and Labor and Welfare government in Japan, and I was struggled with JPS hacking programs with my Director General. And in my experience, many lower rank officers doesn't know the knowledge about how to protect or how to deal with the hacking programs, and it means that many lower rank people have a knowledge about existence of the hacking, but it is very serious problem for many lower ranking officers or employers how to protect these programs. And my question is, what Japanese government does the Japanese government have how to educate or lower ranked employee or officials to protect their hacking systems?
政府の中、日本政府の中ではですね、先ほどちょっと申し上げたんですけれど、サイバー担当の DGG を作る という作ったわけです、昨年の4月で。その中で各省庁にそれぞれポストを作って、そしてその中で技術的なトレーニングをするというのはやっています。で一方で一般のその職員についてはアウェアネスレイジングのためのですね、もっと優しい研修ですね、それをやることによって、フィッシングに引っかからないようにするとかですね、パスワードをどう管理するかとか、そういう簡単なことをやる、そういう2種類の育て方をするということをしています。
So what we do in the Japanese government right now is 2 tracks actually. So as I mentioned earlier, we have created posts in each agency who are, we created a post for DGG who are solely responsible for cybersecurity. This was created last April. And so for these DGG level people, we give them more technical trainings. And for the other employees, we give more of general trainings about awareness raising, so as to they're not tricked by phishing or how to manage their passwords.
We're almost out of time, so I think we can take one more question if there is a question in the audience. Any final questions here in the front?
Thank you. My name is Tina Ayotis. The United States has entered into cooperation agreement with Israel, and I understand that Japan also did that. I'm curious, and obviously Israel has been very active around the world, helping a lot of countries because they are so far advanced in this space. How is the sharing of information being coordinated between the various governments when you're getting information from one government and you're trying to figure out whether you can share that across? And in this instance, obviously, all 3 parties have separate agreements with each other.
Yes, and actually I think it's broader than just the 3 countries. So that's a good question, because it is, but I think it's something that we actually, from a DHS perspective, we employ something called the traffic light protocol, which is used by computer security incident response teams around the world, and most governments have actually adopted this, as well as our private sector partners domestically, and that is really a handling instruction in terms of how the provider of the information, so we're talking about, this is all unclassified information, but how the provider of the information wants that information to be handled by the recipient. And so some of it is, it goes from the scale is, red to white, so white, green, amber, because it was a British invention, to red. And white is, public on the public-facing website, so you can do with it what you want. So a lot of our products that we produce from a DHS standpoint can be posted on other partners' websites if they wanted. They're posted on ours, and we encourage others to use them in that manner. Green is, broad distribution, but it's not on the public-facing website, so sort of for official use. Amber is within your organization, and red is only, your eyes only kind of a thing. So I think that using that enables the effective sharing of information. And then often also, if there's something that we think, if we receive something from Israel that we actually think Japan would benefit from, that perhaps we're not sure whether Israel shared it with Japan, we could go back to our colleagues in Israel and say, we really think this would be useful to our Japanese colleagues, can we share it with them? Or if you have a channel, can you share it with them? But just someone needs to share it with our Japanese colleagues. So there's mechanisms like that we work through with our partners to be able to share that, because it is critical. And that's the same, it's a similar issue with domestic stakeholders. If a company may share something with us but not want us to say, oh, we got this really great information from Palo Alto Networks. Or maybe they do want us to say that, I don't know. Probably do. So maybe that's a bad example. But it's a similar process that we use for that. And we have other protections for other kinds of information, like critical infrastructure information, but that's a separate matter.
We also have similar rule using traffic light rule.
Great. Well, this has been a really interesting discussion for me. I've learned a lot about U.S. Japan cooperation on cybersecurity and the Japanese approach to cyber. I feel much better about attending Tokyo 2020 as well. So that's good. Dr.
all
Misumi,
invited?
do you have any final closing comments? Anything you want to share?
今日は非常に有意義なディスカッションができてですね、それでたくさん勉強することができたと思っています。またちょっと時間が足りなかったので反論したいところもあったんですけれども、また次の機会にですね、また来れたらですね、できたらいいなと思っています。どうもありがとうございます。
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the fruitful discussion, and I've learned a lot through this. But we didn't have a lot of time, so there were some things that I really wanted to say, in counter of what was said, but we didn't have the time, unfortunately, so I would like to come back and have another discussion again.
Absolutely. You're welcome anytime. Just let us know. Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and please join me in thanking the panel.